Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to pick up where we left off in the last lesson, but we're going to incorporate what we have studied throughout this year, which is object oriented programming. So let's talk about one of the issues with our program right now. At this point, you should hopefully have um, the ability to scan in the putting data and the driving data from the data set. Just for memory's purpose, let's go ahead and look at that data set one more time together. So let me bring that up right quick. Okay, so we have here the data set, and this number here is their average driving, and this here is their strokes gained putting on the field of other golfers throughout the year. The higher the number is actually better because we think of getting strokes in golf as not a good thing, but in this case, this is their. You got to think of it as strokes saved, strokes that they didn't count because they made a long putt. So what we realized is that while most of the data lines had 2 words for their name, some had 3. For example, Bo Van Pelt had 3 words. So the only thing we could say definitively was that the last item on the line was putting and the second to last was driving. So what we did was we would scan in an entire line with our scanner, and we used the dot split and we gave it a space. So it split it up around spaces. And what that does is create an array. So that if I have, if I write in Bo, Van, Pelt, let's say like 280.5 and 2.37 or 6 dot split around spaces, that what it generates is this string array. And you can see that we have, arrays are not as easily used as array list. You access different parts of it by using bracket. So bracket 4 was the last thing, and then bracket 3 was the second to last thing. And the length of this array is a variable that you access by just saying dot length on the name of it. So we would say something like, let me get a reference to it here. String array R needs a semicolon there this time. Okay. And then I can say R dot length, and we can look at that. We can see that the length is 5. So we can access the last item by saying, we access a specific item in the array by saying R bracket 0, R bracket 1, but we can say R bracket and then do R dot length minus 1, because the last element in an array is the length of the array minus 1. That's the putting, and then minus 2 gave us the distance. And so what we did was just put that in our loop. We had to deal with one other issue, though, because this next line doesn't there's no like next line double or something like that. We have next double, next int, where you do one thing at a time, but when you do an entire line, everything comes into the string. So we had to use this static method called parse double. There's a parse double. There's also a parse int. There's integer.parseInt and double.parseDouble. You want to know those methods. Those are useful. And that parsed them for us. And then we added the driving distance to the driving data, the putting to the putting data. Okay? All right. So, but the problem is that we don't have any connection between the longest driver and their name. We just know what it is. And we don't have any connection. We can't do any kind of comparisons to see, well, how does someone who drives the ball this way, how do they putt? No, we just have raw data. We don't have any connection between those people. And that's because when you're using primitives or collections of primitives, an array list is also called a collection, all we're storing is one number. We're not storing multiple things. We're not storing relationships. And that's why in Java we have classes. You see, I can't store more than one. I could store only one number in a primitive like an int. And now I got x is 9. I can in an array, which actually is a reference, so there actually is an arrays class. So anytime you want to store more than one thing, it has to be with a class. We can do it with an array. Int x array equals new int, and then I can store some numbers like that. Yeah, x is already defined. I know. I can do that, but I can't store like a name and an int. Does that mean? Yeah, I can't do both. I can only do ints, a list of ints, in an array. So it's we absolutely need to be thinking. Excuse me. When I want to store multiple bits of information, like somebody's name, their driving distance, and their putting distance, I need a class to organize that. So let's create a class called golfer. And in this golfer class, I would like us to have, I want it to be what we call immutable. So we don't need to change their, we don't want to change their values. We just want to be able to access them. And I want instance variables for the golfer's name, the golfer's driving distance, and the golfer's strokes gained putting. The strokes gained putting and driving distance average is doubles, and the name is a string. Make accessors or getter methods for each of those three variables. So if you would please, if you're at home, pause the video and do that. And those are some class. Let's do it now. Okay, hopefully you had success making your class. It doesn't matter what you call your variable names because they're private, okay? But if you would like to match me so that when we do the rest of the coding that we go together, I'm going to go name, driving, putting, because that's the order it's in the line of the data. And let's agree to use these getter method names. So public string get name, which will simply return the name of the golfer. Public double get driving distance, which will return the driving distance. Whatever variable name you called it, the only thing we need to agree on are what's public. Let's agree on get driving distance and let's say get strokes gained putting. If you don't want to use those variable names, that's fine. You just need to, throughout the rest of the lesson, adjust my method name calls to match yours. So this object here is called immutable, okay? So let's talk about what that word immutable means. Mutable means you can mutate it. So, for example, if we had a set name, if I had this public string set name, and I take in string in, and then I change the name, I have now made this class mutable. Because when you make a golfer, you're now able to change their name. In general, oops, I said string. I should say void. Yeah, void because I'm not returning anything. In general, though, I don't want you to make classes mutable until you need to. And even then, we can always allow for the changing of a golfer to be immutable and still allow you to change it. I don't want to go into that too far, but just because we say something is immutable doesn't mean you can't change it. It just means you've got to work a little harder. And it's again goes back to that concept of preventing yourself from making mistakes. So if you make a golfer and it's got the wrong name, just make another golfer with the correct name with the same driving distance and putting stat, which you can get using get and get on the old one. So yes, it's you. So in a sense, you can always change a golfer's name. I mean, what if what if a golfer gets married and takes the name of her husband? We want to be able to change her name. Well, we could still do that. It's not going to break our program. It's just that we are not going to accidentally change it. That's what's important. So some things really need to be mutable. Like if you're making a character in a game that moves around the screen, well, that we don't want to make a brand new Mario every time somebody jumps, right? Okay, so we've got that. Now let's see how to use it. All right, we've got this public void run, which runs our scanner for us, okay, and throws a file not found exception. Remember, we need that. Well, first of all, we're going to get rid of this. We're going to get rid of that because we are no longer going to be storing driving data and putting data in a array list. We're going to be storing. We're still going to use an array list, but our array list will not be of just one piece of information. It will be of the entire golfer. We'll call it golfers. And our constructor will create that array list that will be blank at the beginning. Okay, so we're still scanning and we're getting all this information. We know how to get the driving distance. We know how to get the putting, but we still need to get their name. And what we've seen is in the data, most of the time the name is at index 0 and 1. But sometimes it's not. And I think there's even a few of these that are like 4 long. Got another one of those characters that don't read in very well. I know there's one that's 4. I want to say I've seen one. But like I said, most of them are 2, but some of them are 3. And we need to make sure that we get everything that we need, okay? Siwoo Kim, that's 3. Anyway, it's somewhere there. But so what we're going to do is we're going to have to, we can't just say, the naive solution would be to say something like this, to say that it's my string array, bracket 0 plus space plus string array bracket 1. This is going to work for, Rory Sabatini, okay? It'll work for Rob Oppenheim, but it's not going to work for Siwoo Kim. And he's a good player. We don't want to mess up his name, right? So we need to do better than this. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use a loop. So we'll start with our name as a blank string. We need to do that because if I create the name inside my loop, then I'm recreating that name over again and I won't be able to build to it. So we got to make this variable before the loop. And we're going to loop for int I equals 0, I less than, now we need to be really careful here. If I say I less than len, the length of the array, and we made that separate variable, we could have just said str array dot length. But if I loop through the entire thing, then I'm going to get their putting and their driving again. So I'm going to do I less than len minus 2. I less than length minus 2 means that I will not include the second to last and the last element. Most of the time we loop I less than the length of the array. Because remember, less than means I won't actually reach the number for length. If the length is 5, the indices are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to loop all the way up to 1 less than the length, you want to not take in the last value, do a minus 1, but remain less than, not less than or equal to. And then you want to get everything but the last 2, do minus 2. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say name plus equals and we're going to get that value, string array bracket I. And I know we haven't done a lot with arrays, but they're a little more clunky, not as easy to use, I think, as using an array list where you get to use .get and set and all that. But we'll get there. But this is bracket is how you access a specific one. Okay. Now here's the deal. I want to add a space, but I don't want to add a space every time. I don't want to add a space after the last name is added. Then all of our data will have this extra space. So there's some things I could do. I could use string.trim, which will remove the trailing space. So we could do this and then say, when we're done, we could say name equals name.trim, which will remove trailing white space. But I'm not a big fan of that because we don't need to use it. I would rather just use an if statement and say if I is less than len minus 3, then name plus equals a space like that. So I'd rather just not put a space on if I don't need it. So we know that I is going to go when I is equal to len minus 3. That's the last time. So let's say that the length of the array was 5. Then we're going to go through 0, 1, 2. We won't reach 3 because 5 minus 2 is 3. So first I will be 0, and 0 is less than 5 minus 3, so we'll add a space after the first word. Then it'll be 1. Well, 1 is less than 5 minus 3. So we'll add another space. Then it'll be 2. Well, 2 is not less than 5 minus 3. 2 equals 5 minus 3, and it won't. So this will only add spaces where it needs it, not at the end. That's just my preferred way to do it. If you don't, you can just put a space on all of them and do name equals name.trim. Okay, so now that I've got the name, I'm going to make a golfer. So how do we make an object? First, we have to tell Java what type of object it is. This isn't a double. It's not a string. It's not an int. It's a golfer. Then we need a variable name, an identifier, which I will identify my golfer with G. Not a great variable name, but I'm just going to be adding it straight to a list. G is going to be a golfer each one. So then we say new. Then we say the name of the class, and we have to give it the information in the order that we ask for it in the constructor. My golfer constructor takes string name, double distance, double putting. So name, distance, putting. So name, then I give it the putting. Wait, so the driving distance, sorry. Driving distance, then I give it the putting. No, be sure you don't do something like this. You don't say string name when you call a constructor. That's just when you write a constructor. When you're using a constructor, you just put the stuff there. Okay? So name, driving distance, and putting will all be received in N, D, and P, which will then be stored one at a time into the permanent private variables that we can access here. Okay, so you may have noticed that we've got a lot of errors. And that's because all this stuff that's not going to work anymore. And that's good because this is your fundamentals and we need to practice them. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go right through here and delete. You could start with, something like that if you want. Because that's still going to happen. Well, that's not going to be the case. So basically, most of these things have to all go away. You can leave the total if you want to start counting with, but that's going to have to go away. And so we're going to work through these and write them. I'm going to find the golfer with the largest driving distance, and I will print out the golfer's name and their driving distance. I'll do that as an example, and then you'll do the other ones. So to find the largest driving distance, I need to know the first golfer. Let's go through the algorithm. Let me draw it out. I feel like code does not help you understand algorithm. So we've got a list of golfers, and there's many of them, right? And they're all in these index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., right? All the way to like almost 200. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a distance, okay? Sorry, I'm going to get a golfer that is my guess at the longest driver. And I'm just going to guess that my longest driver is the first person in the list, okay? So I'm going to make a reference that points to the same golfer as index 0 does. I'm then going to loop through each golfer. And we're going to take the golfer. We can put it in a temporary variable. We can ask it. We can say, what is your distance? We'll get your distance and we'll ask, is it bigger than my big golfer distance? Is it bigger? If it is bigger, then guess what's going to happen? We're going to say, okay, this is gone. This is no longer going to be pointing to this index. Nope, that's not the right person. We don't want that anymore. And instead, we're going to say, you get to be the new champion, right? You can imagine almost like in tournaments where they start with the weaker opponents. You know, slowly someone keeps winning till the end, and finally the best seeded opponent at the end will probably win. So that's kind of what it is. We start with 0, and then we keep going, and we keep replacing it with the new winner. So let's do the code. I'm going to make a golfer that I'm going to call the longest driver. And I'm going to set it to golfers.get0. Because with an array list, you get someone by saying .get, and 0 is the first index. Then what I will say is I will loop through all of the golfers. So I'll say for int I equals 0, I less than golfers dot, it's not dot length like an array, y'all, it's dot size, and it's a method. Arrays are weird. Array lists are much more normal, just like almost everything in Java is dot size after that. I plus plus. Okay? So I is going to go through every index in our list. And if we say get I, golfers.get I will get every golfer one at a time. Okay? So I'm going to say golfer G equals golfers.get I. Now, I could actually, I don't actually have to make that temporary variable. I could just say golfers.get I over and over and over again, but I feel like this will be less typing, and it makes sense to do it one step at a time. So in line 33, I'm getting the ith golfer. That'll be the golfer at index 0, then the golfer at index 1, etc., etc. Just by review, when you make a loop, remember you start, this is where I starts. This is the check condition. It will loop as long as I is less than golfers.size. And it does, and this makes I increase by 1. That will happen after it finishes each line of code. So it'll be 0 for the entire line, and then it'll become 1. All right, so we're going to ask the question. We're going to say if G dot, now how do we get G's driving distance? Well, you can see it's right here. Get driving distance. Every golfer has that method. Get driving distance. If that is greater than my longest driver dot get driving distance, then we have a new champion, right? We've scanned down the, if this is true, then the golfer G is a longer hitter than our current reigning champion, and we need to change that champion. Longest driver needs to become G. All right, we're going to go all the way through this entire list. When we are done, we will simply system.out.println, and we'll say longest driver dot get name. And then we can say, we could like write a nice little sentence here, maybe like has the longest drive, but I'm just going to put a colon Then I'll say longest driver dot get driving distance. And close that off. All right, I think that looks pretty good to me. And I think we can try this now. We can say in our static void method, we have golfer stats. That's going to dot run will load our data. Then we can say, I think it's called print largest distance. Let's compile. Oh, I don't need that anymore. And GolfStats is the one that's got our main. So we run that. Oh, I got an error. Oh, you know what I never did? Oh, brother. I never actually added the golfer to the list. So I'm getting an out. I was like, your golfer list is empty. All right. After we make a golfer in our run method, I'm sorry, we need to say golfers.add G. All right. Sorry about that. So let me explain. You might be confused. What is he doing? Where are you? In the run method, we did all this wonderful work to get their driving distance putting, and we created a golfer, and then we never put it in the list of golfers that we made. Okay, so you should have a golfers array list, and it's golfers at add G. Okay, so all right, that was a disaster. Let's try that again. Okay, and there it is, Bryson DeChambeau. This is an interesting fella. He's a Texan. He was not the longest driver when he came out on tour a couple years ago, but he just went after the quarantine lockdown. He just went all nuts in the gym. Came back and he's like just freaking huge now. And now he's hitting the ball longer. So interesting. So what I'd like you to do, okay, is I would like for you, please, to implement these methods. Print. We've already done that. You're going to print the average distance. Now, the average distance, that's still just going to be an average distance. It's not going to be a name, but it'll be a little different to get it. The smallest driving distance, okay, with their name of the smallest driver, the smallest putting and the largest putting. So that would be the best putter and the worst putter, okay? And then the average putting to statistics, just for practice. That's not that interesting since it's always going to be close to zero. And then you should test each method one at a time, and I will post what answers you should get. So good luck.